All right, let's give it a couple more minutes to let people get in, and then we will get started. So hang tight. All right, looks like everyone seems to be in, so we will get started. Hey everyone, happy Thursday and welcome to the last webinar of our industrial cybersecurity series called Taking a Horizontal Approach to Cybersecurity. My name is Scott Siphon with Moxa. Once again, I'll be your moderator for today. So in our first two webinar series, in case you weren't able to attend, we talked about a lot of different things, right, as you're trying to figure out your cybersecurity journey. So we talked about things about making sure you have a security policy, knowing what type of devices are on your network. You know, we talked about user authentication and network segmentation. So if you didn't have a chance to see those webinars, make sure you visit our YouTube channel or visit our cybersecurity microsite. And towards the end of the presentation, we'll remind you on how to get to that site. Today, we're going to take it a layer deeper, and to help us do that, we're going to bring back Rich Wood and Marty Wachi. They're going to kind of go into the details about what exactly does this mean. So before we get started, I do want to remind you, submit your questions. We do want to hear from you. As always, we'll address those at the very end of the presentation. And I think that's all I've got for right now. So Marty, do you want to take over?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Let me go ahead and get this started here. So here's what we're going to cover today. Do a quick recap of what we've previously covered, go over some industry trends specific to this topic, security. Rich is going to come and talk a little bit about, how to increase visibility to control systems in cyber assets based on, some of the trends that we're seeing. This is kind of a topic that a lot of people are looking at. Then I'll come back and give you guys a quick introduction to intrusion detection and prevention, sometimes referred to as IDS, IPS. Give you a quick introduction to virtual patching. We will discuss, why the horizontal OT cybersecurity is important, and take some questions from you guys. So with that, let's get started. So kind of just recapping some things, this is obviously a three-part series. We did this because really securing your network is kind of a never-ending journey. It sometimes probably feels like being on a treadmill for you guys. In our last session, we talked about how having strong authentication policies across all your devices really can help address one of the primary weaknesses of network infrastructure vulnerabilities, which is weak authentication. We've talked in the first two sessions about establishing a defensive perimeter around your network from a vertical security perspective, creating containment zones within your network to try and keep things out. And if you are breached, kind of contain that so it doesn't spread across your entire network. We'll talk today a little bit about, taking that a step further. And then, obviously, since this is a never-ending journey, just keeping in mind that Moxa and our partners are here to support you on that journey. So with that, let's just kind of recap here really quickly. In the first session, we talked a little bit about, where to start. For anybody that missed that, like Scott says, go back and check out the video. But this is really, talking about, establishing a security policy, planning what's on your network, who can access it, what can they get to, starting to implement that policy, knowing what's out on your network, so that you know how to plan and kind of move forward with things. In the last session, we talked a little bit more specifically around the vertical security element, which is where probably most of you are today. Really establishing, a defensive perimeter around your network and those containment zones, really implementing your security policy, determining who's authorized to access your network, limiting their access in terms of where they can go with your switches, your firewalls, your ACLs, and some of the other controls that many of you have implemented based on our polls. Today, we're going to talk about, okay, how do you go the next step further, trying to keep pace with what's going on with these cybersecurity attacks. And this is really introducing the concept of adding horizontal security capabilities to your network, being able to proactively monitor breaches and attacks that may, get past your vertical perimeter security. And how do you respond to those attacks? Having devices and technologies like intrusion detection and prevention, virtual patching, and other management systems to help you with threat intelligence and analysis is really where a lot of the security is moving to based on the attacks. So when you look at the attacks, we kind of covered this before, but this is really relevant to today. So if you look at this, again, the number of attacks are increasing as we kind of move forward in time. Again, a lot of these attacks are not really targeted specifically at trying to breach your vertical perimeter defense. They're targeting, a lot of windows and applications and user behavior. And a lot of them are getting in the network through other means. If you look at the kind of this other survey here from the SANS group, they're coming in via direct access to equipment. So they're coming on USB sticks. They're coming in on equipment that's being plugged into the network, whether it's maybe contractors or even internal folks, maybe coming in through untrusted remote access as an example, all of which bypasses those security perimeter defenses that we kind of talked about in the last session, which is why you have to have kind of this next layer of horizontal security in order to, again, protect your networks against some of these threats. The other thing that they were looking at, and this kind of goes hand in hand, is, for some of the top initiatives, this is really increasing, the visibility and security and OT control systems. And this is where a lot of companies are investing to be able to have that visibility and, then also be able to take action on some of those things. So with that, Rich is going to talk a little bit about how to do that. So Rich.
Thank you, Marty. So when we talk about increasing visibility, I think we're going to discuss two different aspects of that in today's webinar. The first I'll go through is visibility of assets and the configurations on those assets. And then Marty will take us into looking at the actual data that's flowing on the network. So when we look at the assets, what we're really looking to do is, how can I increase my visibility into the assets that are on my control system? How can I increase my visibility to how they're configured, and how can I manage these over time? Okay, so in the previous webinar, we introduced the concept of network management software, and I'm going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into that today and look at specifically, how can we use network management for asset management to discover and track the devices on your network? How can we use that for configuration management to back up and restore these configurations should the network be compromised? How we can use network management for device security policy audits to see if the devices on your network are indeed configured to the policies that you've dictated. And finally, how do we monitor that through events, event logging, and notifications? So before we do that, we'll launch the first poll. Scott, if you can launch that. So basically, are you currently using network management to gain visibility to your network? No, we're not using network management. Yes, we're using an enterprise IT network management tool. Yes, we're using an industrial network management tool, or you're not sure. So if you could just take a few seconds there and vote, then we'll share the results. All right. So it looks like about 28% are not using network management. About 40% of you are, with 26% using an IT tool and 14% using industrial tools, and about a third of you aren't sure. So that's about what we see when we talk to people. So network management has definitely increased over the last few years, and that's good because it's a really good starting point. So what I'm going to take you through the next couple of minutes here is just kind of showing you how you can use one of these tools to increase that visibility. So this is MXView. This is Moxa's network management software, but most of the interfaces are fairly similar. And initially, when you open up the software, it's kind of like a spreadsheet where there's nothing in it when you start. So you start by scanning the range. So that can be a range of IP addresses, or you can scan for all IP addresses. That may take a while, but it'll return a list of all of the components that are currently connected to your network. Then we have this auto topology feature, which then draws the network for you. Okay, so this automatically looks at how those devices are connected, what port to what port, what does the network topology look like, and where are all the devices on the network. From an auditing standpoint, what we get asked a lot is, hey, I need to provide like an inventory report for an audit. And so this has an inventory report feature, all of the network components in more of a tabular format. So you can search this, you can sort it, you can filter it, you can export it. And so this is a very useful feature when you're looking to just validate that there aren't more devices on your network than originally designed. The next thing I want to show you is Security View. And so this is really a tool that will help you look at the configurations of the devices on your network. And so when I launch that, it looks a lot like the topology view, only now you've got these colored circles around each device. And those colored circles correspond to the security policy as implemented on that device. So you can see in this network here, I've got a lot of gray devices. So gray means open or unconfigured. So this would be very typical when you're starting up a new network, you haven't configured the devices yet, this is what you'd see. Then we've got this one device here that's in green, which is at a high level. So that corresponds to IEC 62443, security level 2. The medium or blue color would correspond to security level 1 for IEC 62443. And basic would be, basic configuration for security from an IT perspective. So let's take a look at one of these unconfigured devices and see what it shows you. Okay. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you get this pop-up that shows all of the elements that are involved in the security policy that's programmed into this. And you've got the basic, medium, and high there. And you can see this device here would need these first 4 configured properly in order to meet that basic level of security. And so this one is got all of those checked except for enabling trusted access. So that I could very quickly go in, enable trusted access, and this would now be at the orange or basic level. You can see as you go to the medium level, it adds 5 more elements and a 6th to get you to that high level. So there's also wizards available through our MX Config product that would help you step through the actual configuration process for each of these elements so that you know what you need to configure, how you need to configure it, and at the end, you've got visual confirmation that it's configured to the policy you've selected. So let's take a look at the component that's secured at a high level. And you can see that same list, only there's a green check mark next to each of them. So this gives you that visual confirmation that everything's configured the way you intended it to be. So the last part of this that we're going to look at is logging and alerts. So you definitely want to know if somebody goes in and changes the configuration on a device, you want to at least log that, so that you can go back in time and figure out what happened. You might even want to be alerted to that if you're really sensitive and want to make sure that you catch that before it goes too long. You can also track things like, policy violations, unsuccessful login attempts, link up, link down, should you have a intermittent network problem, and all kinds of other useful information is tracked through this. So this helps you manage the network more on an ongoing basis once you've got it set up and initially managed. So with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Marty, and he's going to help us take a deeper look at how you can look into the data that's flowing on the network to increase your security. So Marty.
Thanks, Rich. So let's talk a little bit about like the intrusion detection and prevention, and give you a quick introduction to that. So understanding kind of how this works. So on the left, you've kind of got the 7-layer model of kind of traffic there. Most of you have some type of Ethernet managed switch device, I imagine, on your network, and that has some limited capability in being able to see kind of what kind of traffic's going across the wire. The analogy that I would use to kind of describe the difference between layer 2 versus layer 3 visibility would be like Amazon packages. I get Amazon stuff pretty much every day. I'm kind of an Amazon addict. When you look at what comes from Amazon, you get the little smiley box, and it's got a deliver to address and a deliver from address, and that's kind of like the Ethernet frame there on the bottom. So you get a little bit of information of who sent it and where it's going, but you really don't know what's inside. So when you have other devices like fully managed layer 2 plus, layer 3 switches, routers, it can see a little bit inside of the package, inside the Amazon box. And maybe what they could see would be, oh, looks like Marty got another camera lens. But you're not going to be able to really get a lot of detail of what's inside the Amazon package and what's inside of that unless you have much more visibility, or what we sometimes call deep packet inspection. So when you have deep packet inspection, this gives you full visibility into all 7 layers of the OSI model, all the way into the application. So this lets you see, the source and destination, which is the Amazon to and from outside box. It shows you, hey, inside Marty bought a lens. Inside that we can see, oh, it's a wide angle, whatever kind of lens, and all the details. So you really need to have that level 7 deep packet inspection capability in your products to be able to take advantage of this IDS IPS. So when we look at that, that's kind of the first element. So you first have to have hardware that supports this. And this is why most switches and routers that you have on your network today don't have this capability, because it's very resource intensive. The second part is really the pattern matching or signature file. And what this is it is kind of like the virus DNA, if you will, that we go and look at the application data that's in that deep packet inspection and compare that virus DNA in the database. And then when we see it, we can either log or block that infection. So really the difference between intrusion detection is intrusion detection is passive. So it has this deep packet inspection, it has the signature files, but it only views and it only logs the information. It doesn't take any active threat response. IPS is really the active mode. So it basically scans and logs, but then when there's a match, it actually actively blocks that packet and that application. So at a high level, that's kind of how it works. The other concept that we wanted to spend some time talking about is this concept of virtual patching. So if you have devices out there that are running vulnerable operating systems, like out-of-date Windows 7 and earlier, older versions and kernels of Linux that may not be being patched anymore, or maybe it's even a current version of Windows, but you're not able to update it because you don't want to take the risk of having some application that you're dependent on in your network, being incompatible with that patch. So what virtual patching does is it is a device that you put in front of that critical device. And it basically blocks any of the OS vulnerabilities. It blocks any of the software application vulnerabilities that are known, protects that industrial equipment, as well as the regular network IDS, IPS protection. So this provides you protection for OSs that are out of date or no longer supported. It also protects systems while you might be deploying patches. Again, making sure that some OS update that you're patching doesn't break some application that you're dependent on in terms of some critical, HMI or PLC or SCADA system. So this is something that is maybe not unique to OT networks, but much more prevalent than maybe what you'd see in an IT type of environment, and definitely more relevant. So this is something that you guys should definitely be aware of and looking at. So with that, Scott, maybe you can pull up the second poll question that we've got here. So one question that we had is, how many of you have already deployed an industrial threat detection or prevention system, IDS, IPS, somewhere in your OT network? If you could take a moment to answer yes, no, or you don't know. And then the second question that we wanted to ask was, do you have any critical systems that are no longer supported by the manufacturer, i.e. an old Windows OS-based solution, maybe running XP or Windows 7 that, can't be patched? So if you could quickly answer yes, no, or don't know. And then our last question that we wanted to ask you guys about, was really, scroll down here. Have you deployed some type of virtual patching technology to, protect these critical assets? I don't know why I can't scroll down here, but so if you could answer yes, no, or I don't know.
Marty, I'll end the polling and share it right now.
All right, thanks, Scott. Okay, so it looks like the majority of you have not deployed an industrial threat detection and prevention. It looks like about 22% of you have. It looks like a good percentage of you do have critical systems that are no longer supported by the manufacturer, or having some type of virtual patching type of device would be useful. And then for some reason, I cannot scroll down. Scott, I don't know if you can.
Yeah, the last one, have you deployed some type of virtual patching technology? 56% said no, 20% said yes, and then the rest is, I don't know, about 24%.
Okay. So thanks, guys, for answering that poll. Okay, so talking about vertical and horizontal. So again, to recap, and we kind of talked about this in the second session. So the vertical security is really the foundation for all OT security. This is really establishing those perimeters, establishing those containment zones, using encryption, if you're remote access and you're wireless, to protect user data. But despite all of these efforts, eventually these security measures are going to get breached. I mean, if you haven't already. So we really have to then start to introduce some type of horizontal security measures to augment that vertical security. And that's where the threat visibility, the threat response, like Rich was showing you in the network management, you can see device level status with most network management. You can see some traffic levels, but you don't really get the visibility into what's actually running on your network from an applications perspective, and that application level detail. So without that, you really can't effectively block and detect some of these threats. So that's where the intrusion detection comes in. So you're able to see and detect those threats. Your intrusion prevention systems are the threat response. So when you see some of these outbreaks, you can not just contain it, but start to block it so that it's unable to expand out through the network or attack a critical device if you're using something like virtual patching to protect those critical assets. So just kind of what it looks like. So again, from a vertical security perspective, we start to use routers and managed switches or smart switches to create, management segments. So in this particular case, you've got the orange, which is the management network, the green, which is kind of the supervisory network. And, you can keep them separated. You can keep stuff contained within those different perimeters. The problem is that like in the supervisory network, as an example, if again, somebody plugs something in, introduces a computer to do some maintenance, let's say, or something, the whole supervisory network could be compromised because, there's no horizontal security or threat detection. So that's where adding something like IDS, IPH, virtual patching to protect these critical assets, to detect some of these devices or some of these threats, will allow you to, even within that supervisory network from a horizontal perspective, be able to detect those threats, respond to them, and protect those critical assets, as well as contain it within that supervisory network. So just really quickly to kind of recap all of this and kind of put a bow tie on it. So, vertical security, establish a defense perimeter, keep things out, prevent things from entering the network. We're using things like switching, routing, and wireless, which many of you guys have deployed. Many of you from our polls are using centralized authentication and VLANs and NATing and firewall to accomplish and create those defensive perimeters. So awesome job. You use tools like network management, like what Rich was showing, to give you that device level visibility, network traffic, network access control. On the right side, as you start to deploy horizontal security, you get that threat visibility and response for that infection detection and threat mitigation. You're going to start to deploy, IDS, IPS systems for intrusion detection and prevention. Those systems will leverage things like deep packet inspection, signature files, which are generally subscription-based, and then virtual patching. These systems tend to have their own application threat management systems separate from your traditional network management. This gives you the application, user, endpoint visibility, and threat response, and can also integrate into many of the IT security response systems that many of your IT support guys are probably using. So with that, just again, a reminder for folks, we modeled this seminar series after kind of the ARC model, kind of going through the different stages that you might be going through your cybersecurity journey. We have our industrial cybersecurity site here that you can go check out. There's a bunch of different resources. We have links to the first two presentations already up. There's white papers and case studies. You can request free trials, additional help, because as we said before, this is not a journey that we expect you guys to go on alone. So definitely allow us to help you guys. So go check that out. And then to just wrap things up, again, we kind of went through over the 3 sessions with you, the ARC model of kind of where to start establishing that vertical security, as well as today talking about starting to add horizontal security, establishing those defense perimeters, using that strong authentication policy across your devices to really harden that perimeter and defensive zones. And then hopefully those of you that aren't already deployed some IDS, IPS solutions will start to think about how you could do that to make sure that your networks are protected. And as always, Moxa and our partners are here to support you on this journey. So with that, Scott, maybe we can have a couple minutes to take a couple quick questions and answers or questions.
Yeah, we do have some questions, Marty. So thanks for all your sharing all your knowledge to you and Rich. So let's dive in. The first question is, I have firewalls and managed switches deployed throughout my network today. So do I really need IDS or IPS and virtual patching?
So let me start, and then Rich maybe could add something if he wants to. So I think in the session, Rich had a slide that kind of showed the graph between, the expense of, a security solution and the liability or, the opportunity cost involved. So I think for everyone, it's going to be a little bit different. I think the key takeaway though is that by only having a vertical security, firewalls, managed switches, things like that, you really don't have good visibility into if you are even attacked, let alone being able to do something about it by blocking it. You really only are containing it, and even in that, you may not know kind of what's running around your network. So again, it's going to depend on the customer, but I think it's something that you definitely should consider, especially as we look at the kinds of attacks that we're seeing more and more. Rich, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, just the only thing I'd add is that setting the security level that you're looking to achieve doesn't have to be the same throughout the whole network. If you can have segments of the network that have higher levels of security, if you've got a segment of your network that has a lot of critical components in it that would have a much higher cost if it were to go down, you might consider only deploying horizontal security on that particular section. So we definitely see where customers are, not necessarily putting the same protections on every part of the network, but really mapping it to the criticality of the network segment.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys. So someone just asked, does MXView work with non-Moxa products, assuming you have non-Moxa products?
Yeah, I think most of the network management software that's out there will work with any manufacturer's components. There are elements of MXView that have more capabilities when you're looking at a Moxa component. Some of the, getting into the configuration wizards and things like that would be specific to Moxa components, but the visibility and the logging and those types of things that I showed are available for third-party products.
Okay, great. So we're a couple minutes over, so let's tackle one more question before we call it a day. So question came in, where does a DMZ fit into the horizontal versus vertical graphic that you showed?
Okay, so the DMZ is really typically northbound of the vertical securities. In other words, the vertical security is kind of creating a defense perimeter around things outside. The DMZ typically is where you would put things that need access to the internet, which is going to be a lot less secure. So you're going to want to have some type of firewall or something between your DMZ and your network on the OT side. And then, like we saw in a lot of previous sessions, based on the poll question, many of you then have layers of firewalls and routers even behind that. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Marty. Yeah, there's a couple more questions. We'll reach out to you directly if we didn't get a chance to address it. For now, Rich, Marty, thanks guys for joining us these last three sessions. For everyone else, thanks for joining us, and hope you got something out of it. We'll continue to have more webinars down the road, so look for invites to those. Until then, be safe and have a great day. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.